for you. So let's first open. Hey, Troy, is our guest speaker already on?
Yeah, Rick is here, and we lost you. Did you like go somewhere else in a different room, or where'd you go?
Who, me?
Yeah, we can't see you. Just
Oh, you can't?
No,
No,
wait,
we like.
Andrea, come help me out. I don't know why you can't.
It's like your camera. I think your camera moved to the reverse or something.
Oh,
There we go.
I'm like Joe Biden. Hello, anybody there?
All right, we won't go there.
Yeah, no, but it is funny with all these guys in technology. I'm
totally.
sorry. So, hey, Rick, I see you. So thank you for joining us. Okay, so just a quick summary of last week. Does anybody have any experiences that they had in the last week in regards to emotional IQ?
Can you do a refresher of that, Del?
So emotional IQ is more around like empathy, kindness. What you give out comes back threefold. Smiling, being communal, invitational, but also emotional IQs around the individual you're talking to, right? In my little black book of connections, it mentioned that the higher you go in the corporate hierarchy, meaning the more wealthy the individual is, the slower that there are to respond. So your emotional IQ needs to match them, right? There's a whole, we could spend weeks on it. But I was wondering if anybody was practicing any of that. Emotional IQ is also very important in goal setting. For instance, if I'm sitting down making expireds and cancel calls and I put an hour worth of effort into it, right? What's my emotional IQ after that? Am I Eeyore, right? Or am I Tigger saying, hey, at least I accomplished my objectives today of blocking out an hour around lead generation? So what I did is the other day I made 4 calls and actually had 2 great engagement calls of expireds that were over 3 years old. 3 years old. So I'm always going to talk about lead generation, lead follow-up, negotiating and presenting. But the other important thing is that, we all need checkups from the head up, and emotional IQ is really important. Like even, you can get into spiritual stuff, right? You can get into yoga. You can get into, hey, how important is for you to see the sunrise every morning, right? You can talk about hikes to get your emotional IQ in line. You can talk about relationships. You can talk about giving back. You can talk about philanthropy. It's endless. But the important thing is, where are you on your emotional IQ? So what I was going to throw out to open this and to get everybody kind of engaged, does anybody have something they'd like to share after last week's emotional IQ layout that they would say that was positive? Okay, moving right along. Troy, you're up.
All right. Well, hey, thanks for joining us today. With us is Rick Whitstock from 1031 IPX, sister company to us, owned by parent company Fidelity, and he's going to obviously share a little bit of his history, background, the company, and what they do. But I'm kind of curious, real quick. Linda was on early, and we were just talking earlier. How many of you, not everybody's on here on video, but have done a 1031 in the last 12 months, or think someone is going to happen here in the next, 6 to 12 months? Okay, so because Linda was just saying she's got one that's probably going to come up. So a lot of interesting stuff around this. Rick's on the call here. Jen, anything you want to do in terms of introduction, or we'll let Rick go?
I want to make sure to introduce Sam. Is she still on?
Yeah.
I saw her. So
yep.
For those of you that know Samantha Jones, she's back with Fidelity. So she's another one of Troy and myself. We all work separately, but just so you know, she's back part of the Scottsdale team at Fidelity. We're very happy to have her. So you have 3 of us to choose from. And then Troy, I know you did a 1031 exchange recently, didn't you?
I did. Rick's involved in it, actually in the middle of it. So we may talk about that at some point. But Rick, welcome. I'm going to make you co-host because I believe you're probably going to share your screen at some point. So take it away.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. I saw a couple of hands go up that 1031 exchange. You might have one that's in the last 12 months or one that's coming up. And man, it's right now the market is crazy, especially on the residential side. Everybody is shuffling properties around. A lot of clients coming from out of state, moving to our state, doing 1031 exchanges. So they're moving their assets here, and 1031 exchange is the great vehicle that I would have to say is probably, even though there's a lot of activity, it's still not used as much as it should be, because it's one of the valuable tools that the IRS put in the tax code to actually help out the economy. And for real estate agents, it's a great tool to get more business. So I'm going to just kind of give a little bit of an overview here. So I'm going to pop up my screen and hang on a second here. I got this on. Oh, that didn't work. Here we go. I'm just going to kind of cover the real basics on 1031 exchange, and then I'm going to kind of go into how 1031 exchange is going to be an asset to helping grow your business. Let me get out of that. Why we're not popped up here? There we go. So 1031 exchange for the timeline, which this is the same as it has been before, but it's had some extensions with COVID. Unfortunately, COVID hasn't got any additional extensions to what the timeline was. It was extended for anybody that had the first part of the year that got under quarantine. There was an extension till July 15th, and we're hopeful that we were going to get another extension, but that didn't happen. But so the timelines are still the same, and they're going to basically help you out as far as getting there, give you some strategies. So the basic understanding of a 1031 exchange is what we're trying to cover today. And I only have a few minutes. I'm going to really pop this up here, but there's three types of properties that you're going to be dealing with, and you deal with on a regular basis. And you don't need a QI or a qualified intermediary like myself to handle those. That's the primary residence. I just literally got a call yesterday from a client that has primary residence from California, and this is where it gets a little creative. He had a property that he made more than $500,000. So he was over the 600,000 is where he actually was with his gain on his primary residence. And that means that he has $100,000 that he would have to pay capital gains tax on, even with this primary residence exclusion. So getting a little bit with putting your thinking hat on, and that's what we do at IPX, is help you with making that work, is that $100,000, we're able to do a 1031 exchange on that portion. Because guess what? He was a real estate agent, and so he had a home office at his home. So that $100,000 that he was over and above his primary residence, he had a section of his home that was set up for home office. So we're able to get a lot of that $100,000 additional gain over and above this $500,000 exclusion to do a 1031 exchange. So there is some ways to help with that situation. Primary residence, for the most part, is not covered under 1031 exchange. They have their own exclusion, which is on the screen right now. But if you have a client that is over and above that, that's where you want to get a little bit creative and see if there's anything that, if they have a home office or they have a casita that they rent out or whatever. So just keep that in mind. And second home, this is the big one that I come across a lot. You guys are, yep, Bill?
Yeah. So did I just hear you that I understand that you're capital gain free, 250,000 for an individual, 500,000 for a married couple. Are you saying if it was 600
yes.
on your primary residence, you can do a 1031 exchange out of your primary? Holy cow.
Yeah, if the portion of it was his home office. So in that case, that home office was for investment purposes. So we're able to, because the property was $1.5 million. So we're able to take a portion of his office, count that close to the 100,000 additional gain, and then do a 1031 exchange on that portion of his primary residence.
Wow.
Yeah. So
right now, if we're all home officing.
Yeah, and you're claiming that on your taxes, right? So as long as you claim it on your taxes, that's a portion of your primary residence that is investment. So you may not think that that's an option. You may end up just cutting the check to the IRS. And $100,000 gain, especially in this particular client, he was in the higher tax bracket. So that was almost $30,000 to $40,000 in capital gains tax he would have to pay. So that $100,000 additional, he wasn't going to see very much of it other than doing a 1031 exchange.
Right,
So,
and that was only because he had a home office.
Home office, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, but the home office, we've done other ones where they had a casita that they rent out the casita separate from the primary or the main house. And then that helps too as well, if you need it. So just get with your tax advisor early to find out what the gain is and see what your options are for yourself and for your clients.
Man, Rick, you guys are so creative. Every time I take your class, you know, because you're the one that told me that you can 1031 exchange also into a REIT. And
Right.
and I mean, every time I have your class, and I'm writing this down because anytime you have a married couple of two
Right.
that are at 500,000, you almost have to do an audit with you to
Right.
see if there's anything that they can shelter.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where we've seen it all. So if it's something that you have that you want to be a little bit creative on, within the rules, of course, we'll brainstorm and we'll try to figure out a solution for you. The second property here, this is a big one that I'm getting a lot of activity up north right now. And some of you guys might have vacation homes or second homes up in the north part of the state. Those properties, unfortunately, if they have just strictly as your personal use property as a vacation or getaway from the heat on the weekends, and you're not renting out that property, the tax is due on the sale of that property. So I had a client just recently that had a property in Prescott, selling the property, wanted to get a bigger second home property because his family's growing and had an opportunity to buy a larger property that could house most of his family. When he's going to sell his property, he's never rented it out, only kept it exclusively for his personal use, and found out that he had to pay a lot in capital gains tax on his gain on that property. So he had to dig into his retirement to pull out a little extra money to buy that replacement property. But if he just rented out that second home, vacation home, a minimum, I can go over this a little bit more in detail if we got a longer time, but the minimum time is 14 calendar days a year that you have to rent out the property and claim that on your taxes. Then you qualify that second home as an investment property as well. So then in that particular case, that client there, where he had to pay capital gains tax and had to dig into his retirement fund to come up with the money to buy the replacement property, which was an upgrade, if he just rented it out 14 days in the last 2 years as Airbnb or VRBO, he wouldn't have to pay any of that capital gains tax and would be able to move all those proceeds from the sale into the new property. So just keep that in mind for your clients that have second homes, or some of you guys might have a second home, vacation home. I know you may be hesitant to rent out that to some stranger, but just a few times a year, that's all you have to rent it out to qualify for 1031 exchange. Of course, though, you have to claim it on your taxes. It doesn't have to be profitable. It just has to be reported as income. If you're getting a loss, well, that's even a benefit for you anyway on your taxes. But that also gives you more flexibility if you want to upgrade, or you're tired of the particular area your property is in and you want to go to a different area. You can take all the proceeds that you've made or gained from that property and go into another property in a different location and not have to pay any capital gains tax. And then, of course, the third property type is what we're always going to talk about here when it comes to 1031 exchange, is strictly an investment property. So investment properties could be residential, commercial, a piece of raw land, or it could be a primary residence with an office in it like we talked about, or it could be a second home that you rent out part-time. All those qualify for investment properties. And when you have that, the greatest thing that I think is in the IRS tax code is subsection IRS 1031 exchange. It's probably the most unutilized part of the section that actually helps a lot of people move and buy other properties. And then some of you might be thinking, and I know I heard this on the media recently with what's going on with the presidential race, 1031 exchange is a loophole for the rich. And we've done studies on it. It actually is more utilized with middle class. So if somebody that's got a couple investment properties, maybe 5 or 6 different residential properties that they bought and build up and looking for their retirement, they're the ones that are using 1031 exchange. Yeah, we do the 50 to $60 million transactions as well, but it's mainstream middle class America that's utilizing 1031 exchange. And then sometimes they're not utilizing 1031 exchange. Anytime that as a real estate agent, as soon as you come across a client that's wanting to sell any investment property or second home, you want to pick up your phone or have your client pick up their phone and call their tax advisor or talk to somebody like myself that we can kind of get a game plan before you even put it on the market, because that's going to be critical. You don't want to wait till the last minute because then your options are going to be limited.
Jay has a question.
Yep.
Hi, Rick. G. Harry. Maybe outside your wheelhouse, but just want to ask you anyway.
Sure.
On the vacation property situation.
Yep.
If you traded in, if you swapped as part of your upswing to a more expensive property, you're able to coordinate that with trading in that prior property on the sale. Do you know anything about that in regard to deferment?
As far as trading it in and then going to a larger, greater property, is that what you said?
Well, swapping the house, trading it in like a car to the guy selling his bigger house.
I'm not clearly getting what you're saying there. So that if the property is on the larger side, if you bought that one already up front, is that maybe?
No. So, excuse me. So if I have a $500,000 vacation home and I buy $1 million vacation home, and the seller takes mine in trade.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you're doing a direct swap with the client that's actually buying, that you're buying his property, he's buying your property.
Plus the delta.
Right. That's what we call a direct swap exchange. It's as long as, in his case, the one that, if you're buying the larger, more expensive property, and then the one that has the more expensive property is buying the property that's less, that's doable. But what's happening there is, let me explain a little bit before I answer that completely. What like kind is, can be anything commercial, residential, or a piece of raw land. So you can go from one to the other. What really like kind is that you have to spend or buy the net sales price or greater on the replacement property. So if you have a $500,000 property and you're doing an exchange, what's considered like kind is commercial, residential, or land, but it has to be $500,000 minus commissions and closing costs. So you might end up with like a $480,000 net sales price. That's what you have to reinvest. So Gene, in your example, if he's going from the smaller property to a larger property or a more expensive property, he's fine. But the direct swap, the one that's going from a larger property to a lesser property, is doable. It's a partial exchange. And then whatever the balance difference is, he would either have to buy another property to make up the difference or go into a REIT like Dell mentioned for the difference, or worst case scenario is that difference would be considered boot, which is an old English term, and you're just subject to tax on that portion.
Thank you.
All right. But very good question. And that happens a lot too, because there's a lot of my clients now, there's some that are in the towards the end of their building up their portfolio. So now they want to exercise and utilize that investment, and they want to see the fruits of their labor prior to, going to the other side. So when they have that property, they're looking at either downsizing, getting something that's a little less for them to maintain as an investment property, or they're doing an exchange into what they call that REIT, which is a DST. And that's a Delaware Statute Trust. It's like kind because it's a property that you get tenants in common, so you get actually a piece of ownership of a, say, triple net commercial property that is considered like kind. So you avoid the capital gains tax in that transaction. And then you also get mailbox money or residual income from that transaction. So that's a big trend that's happening right now, that a lot of people are doing this as more of estate planning, getting their affairs in order, looking for options that's going to help out their heirs when they receive it. And if you have a client that's like that, that's giving you the answers like, well, I don't want to sell my property, I don't want to deal with anything, because I'm just going to let my kids deal with it when I die. Get with them. There's a whole program that I have that can help explain to them that it makes more sense to sell it, especially if they have more than one heir. They can sell that one investment property or two investment properties and put it into a situation where it's going to be more accessible for their heirs. So there is no probate, no fighting, and so on and so forth. All good questions. So this is another main reason here, of course, is why you'd even want to consider doing a 1031 exchange. I mean, the capital gains tax, some accountants will tell you that it's the lowest it's been in 35, 40 years. And that's true because back in the 80s, early 90s, it was almost 50% the gain you have to pay in capital gains tax. Now it's about 20 to 30%, depending on what your tax range is. But 20 to 30% is still a lot of money. If you have a vehicle like a 1031 exchange that avoids you having to pay that you can leverage it to buy more properties, why wouldn't you? So it's a tool that you can get with Jen, you can get with title, and pull out different property owners, investment property owners. Canadians qualify for doing 1031 exchange. Out-of-state owners that own investment properties are a good target to go after because maybe they want to upgrade their property. They might have a property that's 10, 15 years old. So every other month, something's breaking down on that property that now their cost of making on that property is getting less and less because of the cost of keeping that property running. They may want to take that property, sell it, do an exchange, and buy a new build. A lot of my clients are looking at the new build option because hey, you got a home warranty on it, it's newer, less issues that are going to come from it. You can even move your clients that are in the investment property into the new build, keep your tenants, maybe give them a little bit of a bump in the rents. And then now you're going to profit more even if you keep the rent the same because you don't have all that maintenance involved. So, and if your property is fully, yeah.
Rick, on that probably really helps out with the 180 days because I think that's been the biggest issue is you got to identify those 3 properties and they move so quickly right now.
Exactly. And identifying a new build is, you can do that easily within the 45 days, and that might bring us back to Troy's situation is that he's doing a new build. You got to get it started early on the replacement side because you only have 180 days to complete that new build. So there's some other challenges that you have to look at with that too. Again, we're for time's sake, if you have any of those types of scenarios, be free to give me a call. We'll be able to help you out with that as well. But preserving that equity is the big draw. And I don't know how much more time I got, but I want to show you this. This is what you're going to be taxed. Like I said, back in the day, some CPAs will tell you that, pay a tax now because it's the lowest it's ever been. But federally, it's a range anywhere from 15 to 20%. So I hardly ever see anybody in the 15% range. It's usually 17, 18, or even 20, because you might be low income or fixed income. You sell a couple properties, bring 100,000 or two in gains, you're going to go up into a higher tax bracket for that year of that sale. So it's somewhere between 15 and 20 is federal. And then, of course, depending on where the property is, not where you live, but where the property is located, you're going to have to pay capital gains state tax. Arizona is 5%. The highest is 13.3. Anybody want to take a guess on what state that is?
California?
New York.
California and New York's right in there. But California is up to 13.3 capital state gains tax. And then there's another one little thing that most people don't even consider is the depreciation recapture at 25%. A quick story, I had a client that was set up to exchange with me, and escrow was just doing up the settlement statement for the clients and for the closing. And she's like noticing when she's going over the numbers, why is this guy doing a 1031 exchange? And she said, look, he looked like he bought it at the height of the market, and now he's selling the property for literally what he bought it for. So he has no gain, and he shouldn't have to do a 1031 exchange. He actually has to come in with escrow with funds. So the reason why he had to do it in that example is because he's owned the house for 7 years, and every year on his taxes, he was depreciating the dwelling. So even though he didn't have on paper, it looked like he didn't have a gain, he had almost $100,000 in depreciation benefits on his taxes over the last 7 years, which at 25% recapture, that was a $25,000 capital gains tax he would have had to pay if he wasn't doing a 1031 exchange. So be very careful if you have a client that may have bought in 2005 and maybe they're now finally at the point where it's the same value as what they bought it at. for the most part, people are above that now. But if it was that situation and they're saying that, and you give them that advice like, oh, you bought it for 500, you're selling for 505, you won't have any capital gains tax. Don't say that, because you could be liable not knowing what his depreciation is. Anything you say tax related, of course, puts you on the spot being the licensed real estate agent. Always, if you're going to give anything, refer them out to the experts that can help them with that, making that decision. You can just say, looks like you might have a gain, you should talk to Rick, or you should talk to your tax advisor and get the real goods prior to even putting it on the market if you're in that situation. And then there's a little tax down the bottom here that's federal, is the PPACA tax, the Affordable Health Care Tax. That's a federal tax. It's on all properties, residential and real estate and commercial. If they reform the affordable health care, and that's a whole political thing, which I'm not going to get into, that could go away. But at the moment, it's still factored in on the federal side. How much time do I got, and or which direction does anybody want me to go?
You're doing great. As long as people are asking questions and engaging, Rick, we're good.
Yep.
And it's like you're off to a great start. Great information.
Perfect. Does
So
anybody have
Linda-
any questions now?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to ask this in the beginning, and this probably is a stupid question, but on your chart, it shows, what did it say? Non-recognition of gain. What does that mean? That was never explained. So when you got into all the rest of the stuff, I could understand it, but I'm not sure how that applies.
Is this right here you're talking about on the screen now, the
Yeah.
non-recognition
Yeah,
of
it was
gain?
on the previous screen also, and I'm sorry for my stupidity.
No, you're fine. That's just basically disclosing on my end that on a primary residence that there is no exclusion. It's unless you get the 2 out of 5. So then that's where I lead into the next side where you got the 2 out of 5 exclusion under the 121.
Okay.
That's how my attorney wanted me to put that on there. So I have full disclosure.
Okay, so my next question is that in reality, 1031s are really for investment properties. So not for just anybody who has a property home, they're moving to another state and they want to get another home and they think that they can exchange because they're selling their house here and they're going somewhere else. They can't really do that.
They only if they need to, because with the primary residence, that exclusion that's under the 121. Let me go back here. I'll show you a screen. So under the 121, that's another tax code for just primary residence. And to qualify for this exclusion, you have to have 2 years out of 5.
Right.
And so they get this 500,000 if they're married. And the only time that you would need somebody like me to step in is if they have a substantial gain over and above these numbers, and that portion of the primary residence was a home office, or they rented out a room as Airbnb, or they had a casita that they rented out.
What happens, if
Yep.
I can ask, what happens if they have an emergency and they have to sell their home and they haven't been in it for 2 years, but it's almost going to be 2 years, but now they have to go somewhere else for their job? What
Good
happens
question.
to those people?
Good question. There is, under the 121 tax code, there is exceptions to that. So if it was an emergency or they were in the military and it was of no choice of theirs that they had to move from that property, and it's before the 2 years, you can have your tax advisor submit that to the IRS to get that exception. So if it's a situation where it is an emergency or it's beyond their control, they can sometimes qualify, but it's going to be up to a case by case with the IRS if they approve that or not.
Okay, great.
But
Thank you.
it might be definitely worth it if you're like at 1.5 years and then you're in the military and they relocate you to the other side of the country and you have to be forced to sell the property. So you're that close to being 2 years. No, it wasn't of his choice. He's being relocated. Then they may get that exception and get that $250,000 or $500,000 exclusion.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Good question. Any other questions on that? Or I'm going to keep going here a little bit. Get back to where I was. Okay, so this is another, like I kind of hinted on this one a little bit, is that if you got a large residential portfolio with the inventories that are so low right now if you have clients that have a lot of single family properties, this might be a great time to go into commercial. The commercial, I handle commercial and residential, and commercial is a little bit sluggish right now. There's a lot of restrictions on financing on commercial transactions over $10 million. So there's not as much activity in the commercial world versus residential. So it might be a great time to sell high your residential investment properties and buy low on the commercial side, like a multifamily or self-storage or whatever your client might be interested in. I have a client right now, very creative. I'm not going to say what he's exactly doing, but he's selling his rental properties and he's looking into buying drive-up restaurants, drive-through restaurants. Of course, that's a big demand right now. Everybody's going through these drive-ups to get food. So, but I don't know if that's a short-term investment or it's going to be for the long haul. Let's hope it's a short-term, because I'd rather sit down at a restaurant than go through drive-up all the time. But look at different strategies, kind of go in as more a consultant with your client. And if you need help with any of these creative ideas, let me know. I'd be happy to have a conversation that way. You could stimulate, in this transaction, could 4 single families or 3 single families and maybe a commercial. If you don't have a commercial agent in your office, I think you guys do, right? Do you have commercial too, Del? Yeah.
We do. Brett Nicholas, that's on the line with us.
Right.
Yeah, and then Chris, Antonio, of course Jim Zimzonic, but we have a good fundamentally commercial division.
Right. So you guys could work hand in hand as a team on that. Maybe you might have a client that has 5, 6, or 3 single family. Might be a good strategy to create some business selling those, putting those properties on the market right now where inventories are low on the residential side. And like I say, buy some commercial properties. That might be a little bit of a deal right now too. So just another way to try to stimulate. This is another one that a lot of clients are looking at now, especially if they got hit with the downturn back when we had in 2008, when we had our downturn in the real estate market. If you were 100% invested in one area like Phoenix or Florida or Nevada, and the market crashed, anybody that owned properties there know your values were cut in half. Short sales, foreclosures, whatever was happening to those investment properties. So some of the ones that have been burnt before are looking at diversifying their portfolio. So it's kind of like your 401k, you want to diversify it in real estate. Diversifying means putting it in different pockets of the United States. So this is a couple examples here. And if the market does slow down or go, hopefully it different crashes again, but if it slows down, some marketplaces get hit harder than others. So you might have one in California, say in San Diego, and one in Florida. Florida maybe takes a little bit of a hit, but your San Diego one offsets the hit on the Florida one, which means you can keep your portfolio going until the downturn is over. So diversifying is sometimes, if you're old school and you want to drive by your investment properties, make sure they're still there and the tenants didn't burn them down over the weekend. May not be for you, but there is a lot of tools that are available to keep an eye on your property. From either, I don't have to go into all that, but I'm sure you guys are aware there's a lot more tools that you can property management properties from other states. And this is where I'm going to just kind of throw in the timeline just as a refresher for some people, and to kind of give you some ideas to create more out of this timeline. So this is a full delayed exchange timeline right here, full circle. Some of the exchangers is the taxable property or the investment property being sold, which is also the relinquished. You got a buyer, and then only thing different in any normal transaction is funds do not go to the exchanger or the seller. If they do, they become taxable. So we're the third party that holds those funds and lets the IRS know that they're controlled and they're only going to be used for the replacement. So QI is the abbreviated name that I have, but it's qualified intermediary is the full. We're also known as accommodators or 1031 guys, whatever that case is. We hold those funds in an exchange account so that they're secure, and the sole purpose of them is all documented, that it's only going to the replacement property or properties. So you can use those funds just like liquid, just like cash, but they're only going to an address or a property that you're buying or being built. So earnest money deposits, all that can be used for the replacement property from the exchange accounts. The timeline is the biggest hurdle, we'll say, when it comes to doing an exchange. And it kind of freaks everybody out a little bit when they see a hot market, they're putting an offer down on replacement properties and they're getting beat out by the next guy. So they're like, 45 days is not enough time. And surprisingly, I have 200 exchanges in the pipe right now for this month already, and they're all working out for the most part, because you can hedge your bets a little bit. So when you have that relinquished property on the market, get an offer on it, you can control, for the most part, when the close of escrow is going to be on that investment property. So if you got a cash buyer that wants to close in 2 weeks, push it out a little bit if you can. Go 30 days. If it's financing, you're going to get 30, 45 days of closing anyway. So what are you doing once you got an offer on the table and you got to sit for a month to close? You should be out looking and putting offers on the replacement property. You can use your own funds, and then the exchange can pay you back once it's open to get that property under contract. And a lot of my clients within this 45 days are closing on the replacement property. So that's one way to get a little bit more time than the 45 days. The 45 days is enough, but it's a little bit more stressful when you're putting offers on multiple properties and not getting the winning offer. If it comes down to that, as a backup, I kind of touched on it a little bit. If you're, say, on day 40 and you're having no luck, you can have a failed exchange and just pay your tax. We'll return the funds to you. But if you want to avoid paying capital gains tax, you could ID one of those DSTs or REITs where you can put your money into. And then you got 180 days or the remainder of 180 days to decide if you want to do that or not. And with the DST, if you can't find a replacement property, that's going to give you that residual income, and it's going to avoid paying capital gains tax. And you can always exchange out of it back into real property that you manage. So you do have to keep it in there for at least a couple of years, but it is a way to avoid paying capital gains tax. And if you're under the gun, it's a good thing to identify just to do your due diligence on. So having that said, you got a total of 180 days to close. So if you were doing the new build like we're doing with Troy, and you're going to do a new build, get with the builder, put the deposit down, get that property started early, so that you have the 180 days to have it completed, because you have to get it done within 180 days. It sounds like 180 days is 6 months, but it's not. It's 180-day calendar days. So it depends on what day you close on is when it starts. Any questions on the timeline there, or is this familiar for some of you guys, or will be once you start getting into more exchanges? We're all good on that? Okay.
What does or tax filing deadline mean?
Good question. Or tax filing deadline. So if you close your property, your taxable property in December, November, towards the last quarter of the year, if you do the math, 180 days is going to go beyond April 15th. So you have a choice to make on an exchange at that time period of the year, because you're not going to get the 180 days full, because you're going to file your taxes for 2020 on April 15th. So if you stick with that and don't apply for an extension, if you need the more time, you would have to apply for an extension for your taxes on April 15th to extend it out if you need that time frame. So if you don't, then if you close on November, your deadline is going to be April 15th instead of 180 days, is what that means. Good question. Good catch. Okay, so everything, of course, with us, because we're reporting this back to the IRS, it all has to be documented. So when it comes to rules and IDing the properties, we like it all in writing, but some of you might be looking at 9 to 10 different properties. We don't need every 9 to 10 different properties unless you're under contract or you're getting close to that 45 days. Because if you give us 3 or 5 properties that you're interested in, and then you decide that you don't want any of those, then you have to give it or revoke it in writing to pull it back out again. So you can keep your list with your client, or if it's your property, you can keep that list of as many properties as you want that you're looking for. But when it gets closer to the 45 days, then narrow it down and send us the ones that you're considering strongly. So leading to that is there's two types of ways to identify. There's the 3-property rule, which is probably the most popular one because we don't care what the fair market value is of the property. You're just going to be limited to 3 units. So, and out of those 3 units, if you go beyond 45 days in your exchange, you can only pick from those 3. So one of those 3 or all 3 of those you can end up buying. But after 45 days, you can't add or change. It's what's there with the 45 days is all you can pick from after that point. Then in commercial, or if you want to buy multiple properties, the 200% rule is the second option. So this one is basically going to be limited on number or dollar amount versus units. So if you got $1 million transaction, the gross sales price, it's 2 times that million. So you'll be at 2 million. You can identify as many replacement options that you want to look at, but it has to say under the $2 million amounts. So these are the 2 most popular. In residential, this one's usually the 3-1 is usually used the most, but if you're buying multiple properties, you may want to do this. And again, you don't have to decide that. Your client doesn't have to decide that up front. You can kind of walk through the process and we can help you, which is the best way to go on that identifying rules. Okay, and we covered this already. This is just saying how broad like kind is. And here's the whole list. I'm just going to highlight a little some of the odd ones that I've worked with. And when I say odd, I've done some cell phone towers. Cell phone towers you wouldn't think is like kind to property up in Flagstaff that they're going to Airbnb, right? But it was because this guy that had these cell phone towers owned the land, or he owned the easement where the cell phone towers sat. So he sold it as real property because it was attached to the real land. And he sold all 3 of them and was able to buy property up in Flagstaff as his second property / Airbnb. So he gets to use it and rent it out. And he didn't have to pay any capital gains tax on those cell phone towers. So that's one of the weird ones I've did or odd ones I've done. Billboards, for some reason, I've had a few of those in the last few months. Not here in Arizona, but they're all back east. So there's one gentleman that had 3 billboards back in Missouri, and he sold those and bought 3 rental properties for his grandkids to move into. So he put them under a trust, bought these 3 single-family properties for his grandkids. They're renting it back from grandpa. And then guess what? Each one of those kids is listed as the beneficiary of those rental properties. So when grandpa passes away, it's going to become their property. And for some of you guys may know that when you receive real estate as an inheritance, you get a stepped up basis, which means that the heir of that property does not have to pay any capital gains tax. They can decide to sell it without paying any tax, or they can convert it to their primary residence at the time of their inheritance, or they can hold it as an investment property, and then any gain from that point on would be the only thing that they'd have to pay capital gains tax on, or they could do a 1031 exchange. A lot of information I'm throwing at you guys. How are we doing for time?
Bill, why don't you speak?
Yeah, no, I think we're good. Is there, there's so many options, Rick. You're amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
Why don't we open it up to any questions so far?
One question, Rick.
Yes.
I've got a client who is getting ready to get dinged by Denny's because she owns the land that they've got restaurants on over in LA, and they're trying to bargain to reduce their lease by 40% because of COVID and all this.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know that she would want to give up a land lease on that type of property, but is that an option?
It is. As long as she has, it's on the screen right there, as long as she has a 30-year initial lease, and that there's an option for at least 30 years. So it depends on how the lease contract on the land is written, but it would qualify that she could sell that and buy residential or commercial or land again if it has a 30-year lease.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Good question. Water rights is another one that comes up a lot here in Arizona, up in the North Country. I've done a few of those. Probably the one that's probably the most interesting for me was I did a gold mine claim exchange. A gentleman had a 30-year lease on a gold mine claim up in Alaska. He had 2 of them. And I guess he couldn't find gold in those ones. So he sold those and to buy 3 other gold mine claims. So he was able to do that under a 1031 exchange, not to pay any capital gains tax. But I mean, he made money on the claim. He didn't make very much money on the gold, is what he was telling me. But he's hoping to make more on the other ones that he just bought. Any other questions on that? I'll just put it up here. This is just the reminder what you need to do as far as setting up the exchange. Get with your tax advisor or somebody like me early in the transaction. I'm working with clients that haven't even put their property on the market yet. Probably not going to put it on for like another 6 months or so. But they contacted their CPA, and the CPA put them over to me. They're doing their due diligence way in advance, and it's important that you get that information up front, especially if you have some unique situations. If you have a partnership, if any of your clients have a partnership that they're looking to sell their property and there's more than one person on title, get with their tax advisor, get with somebody like me early before you even list it, because a lot of times partnership issues, you might have bought the property together, but then now they want to go their separate ways. And depending on how they have it set up or vested or titled, could limit them on what they can do. And once it's already listed and marketed, then it makes it a little harder to change any of those things. So always contact. Doesn't cost anything to talk to me about any of these structures. It does sometimes cost money to talk to your attorney or CPA, but get with the professionals as soon as you can. It'll definitely help show that you're a professional and that your client's going to be more, oh, well, this guy knows his tax, he knows everything else. He can help us out full circle and offer the full meal deal versus just selling a real estate property. But this is the process that you need to remember. Find the buyer for investment property, get it under contract, and it has to be set up before close of escrow. So even if you're at the 11th hour and you're signing on Friday, I got 2 of the day actually I'm putting together that's signing tomorrow. We're able to put that together as an exchange prior to it, but sometimes it's put together at the last minute and the client may not know exactly what he's getting himself into with the exchange. So earlier is always a lot better, gives them more time to kind of digest and make that educated decision. And there we got questions, and there's my contact information right there. If anybody wants this PowerPoint or they want the cliff notes of this PowerPoint, I can email that to Jen and Troy, and then they can forward that on to any of you guys. Or if you want to directly just email me for it, that's fine too. That's a website there on the bottom, ipx1031.com/my last name is the personal page for Arizona. New Mexico is where I manage the 2 states. There's also a newsletter you can sign up for. Once a month, I send out a newsletter on related related topics to our industry. Any other questions on the chat there, or anybody else have anything else? Or
Yeah, so hey, Jen and Troy, yes, we would like that PowerPoint presentation. So if you can send that out to everybody on this call, that'd be great.
You bet. And Rick also teaches a 3-hour CE class on 1031 exchange. I know we had him probably in the past 6 months, but we could probably schedule him for another one. Next month, we've got the ethics certificate with Marty Barnwalt in September scheduled for your office, but maybe the following one we could get Rick in if you guys want for a credit hour class on 1031. And I believe that legal issues.
it's legal issues, yes.
All right, Jen, now,
Bill,
yeah, go
sorry, I
ahead.
was going to jump in. So you often focus on lead generation. So kind of just springing off of what Rick has said and shared, what are maybe some of your thoughts on there, in terms of like one of the things you mentioned was out-of-state sellers that might 1031. Jen and I and Sam can help, pull a list together, some tools we have, if you want to talk about that. But what are some of your ideas that come with what he's been talking about?
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly on. If you look at our number 1, number 2, number 3 import states, so you would go to places like California, Illinois, New York. A lot of those monies are flown out there. In our $3.7 million Silverleaf listing just this last week, in the last 7-day period, we've had 3 buyers drive in from LA that have all looked at that property because they're all, looking at ways to divest. And 3.7 in LA or Huntington Beach or, all the great beach areas get you nothing, where here it'll get you in a guard gated community with an unbelievable view. So I think, Jen, if you can tap into any of that, that'd be great. We would like that.
Yeah, so we have the ability to pull farm lists, and we can pull investor lists. So if you are looking for somebody that owns 2 or more properties in a specific zip code, neighborhood, area, we can do that. And then also we've pulled lists for people that own property out of state, like maybe you're from Chicago or Nebraska and you want to talk to owners that this is their second home, and Nebraska or Chicago is their primary. We can pull it that way. And one of the easiest ways for us, because sometimes a city will get too big and even a zip code, is to give us a square of streets. So you could just give like me, Troy, or Sam, like Shea to Tatum to Cactus to Scottsdale Road, and we can pull everything in that, and you can give us specific requirements if you want single family only, 2,000 square feet above, built 1990 and newer, whatever you want, and we can filter that for you and then add the other layer for out-of-state owners or investors. So
Troy, to give you an idea, on that software program you gave us, these are 10 people that I'm calling today in Silverleaf that were expired listings that are still owned by the same people, meaning they didn't switch hands. And you can see the numbers right there, and that was off your search base. So if anybody doesn't have that, now I'll tell you the accuracy of these. I'm calling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm calling 5. I'll give you feedback on the accuracy, but the reason why I'm calling these is because we had that new 3.7, but we also have the $4.9 million one pending on lot 1488. And so my call is twofold. A, do you have any buyers for that one that we have listed on Chino? Or B, we have this house pending at 4.9 million. Would you like a market analysis on your house, right? Because some of these people, correct me if I'm wrong, the Canadian border and the American border right now is closed. Is that correct?
I believe so.
All right.
It is if you're driving. If you're flying, it's not, as long as you have a business that's essential.
Yeah, so check this out. We all know that November, December, January is right around the corner. What's happening to all these Canadians that aren't going to be able to come back here this year? That aren't, I don't think 180 day or the 181 days for sun, correct me if I'm wrong, right? Or golf is essential, right?
No, and they have to quarantine for 14 days when they go back. Because my next door neighbor, she's Canadian. Her parents have a house on our street also, and they just came out for the first time since March to see their grandkids. And they had to quarantine for 14 days going back, and they can only come if they fly. They can't drive across the border.
Okay.
So, and the exchange rate on top of that, if you were to buy right now, I mean, it's not in their favor, but it's in their favor to sell.
Right. So now we know where the puck is going, right? We don't see anything happening, late third/fourth quarter, or at least I don't. It seems like the pandemic is continuing. In fact, I read in the Wall Street Journal today that there's a whole resurgence now in Europe, in Spain, because they've opened up nightclubs and that kind of stuff to where they're actually going backwards now as a resurgence. So now we know where the puck might be going. The question now is, how do we take advantage of that? Do you reach out to your Canadian people now and say, hey, just food for thought, it doesn't look like the pandemic's going to get any better. Would you like to get involved in our rental pool, right? Do you want to rent your home to maybe a domestic renter for October, November, December, January, February, March? It might get your foot in the door, right? Explain the other advantages that, you got FERPTA and some other items there, Rick, so I don't want to get in over my head on capital gains, but this 14 days is huge. Anybody that I know owns a second house, I'm going to definitely get that message out to them that they should be renting it 14 days a year in every calendar year. Anybody that wants to contact Jen or Troy or Samantha, these are numbers that I'm calling today. And every day you have to be prospecting and talking to people that you don't know. If you only make 5 of those calls a day and 2 answer, at the end of a month, that's 40 leads that you have of people that you didn't know, right? So you have to push the lead generation idea. And believe me, it's painful for everybody. It's hard for me to sit here for an hour calling people because I get antsy. But you'll notice I have 4 of these on my desk, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and 10 minutes. And I turn these, right, to keep me focused, right? Because even if I can sit in my chair for 10 minutes and make 5 calls, I know I can make a shitload of money. I get fidgety. So put some of these on your desk and little reminders of what we're here for. The other thing that you'll see on my desk is I always have a grid sheet of how many calls I'm making per day, so I can do self-evaluation at the end of the day. So if I only have like 3 or 4 X's on my sheet, bad day, and that means bad income to come. If I can maximize my sheet and get 35 calls in, great day. I'm going out for a steak dinner. I'm looking at a new car, and I'm upping my limit on my credit card because I know that there's money to come if you reach out for that stuff. So the 27 people today that are on this call, I'm extremely proud of you. I know it's hard to put an hour aside. I'm available. I door knocked yesterday, 10 door knocks with Cherie Reeves down in the Arcadia PV area. I don't think Cherie is on the call, but I think we had 3 conversations out of those 10. And we left door packets behind so that that if the people do see it. And oh, by the way, guys, when you are out there door knocking, the Ring doorbells are awesome. You can have an interview, a Zoom interview, basically right now on a Ring doorbell. It's phenomenal. A girl named Terry answered her Ring doorbell, and we had about a 3-minute conversation. I don't know where it's going to go, but Ring doorbells are awesome because it gets you in front of them. And then remember, the only thing I'm looking at a door knock is really an email address and a phone number. Highly likely will you close them right then. But I have been invited in on door knocks, even during COVID, to look at their house. You just want to back away
because I think those are all really good things. I love your little timers because it's so easy to just suck away time and not know where it goes. And Fidelity, we all read a book called Atomic Habits this past quarter. We do a book a quarter, and it's really good. I highly recommend it. It basically talks about how you can get 1% better or worse every day and what you do to make that needle move one way or the other. And I actually downloaded the audiobook, and it was funny. All 3 of my boys got so quiet and started listening to it. And then one of them wanted to use it for homework last week for one of the pages. So even they liked it, but I am horrible at reading. So I have to do Audible because I just can't sit still, kind of like you. I get squirrely. So I just do it on Audible, but it's Atomic Habits. Really, really good.
I love it.
Yeah.
You got it. Go ahead, Troy.
I was going to share something super quick. This is how easy it is to get out-of-state owners. This is Fireside, Desert Ridge. This is the neighborhood I live in. I go right here, out of state. Out of the 912 people in my neighborhood, there's 59 people that live out of state. I want that list. I go here, I download a CSV file, and there are the 50. Here are the 59 out-of-state owners that live in my neighborhood. So it's really that easy to for us or you, we can give you a count, to have a list of out-of-state owners in any neighborhood area that you're farming, and so we can help you with that. And then to your point, get phone numbers and email addresses. I know we're at the end of time, Rick. I said 30 minutes. You've been on for 60 minutes, so thanks for your time.
That's fine. Appreciate you guys having me.
He's great. Like Jen said, I'm doing one with him right now. So great team. If you need any help in the 1031, Del, thanks for the time. Any last words?
Yeah, do something today that makes you extremely uncomfortable.
Love it.
Right.
All right,
Thanks,
everybody.
guys.
Thanks for joining us. Have a
All
great
right,
day.
thanks.
Be well.
Bye, guys.